Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at an introduction to the books of 1st and 2nd Kings. The Old Testament is broken up into 4 sections: the Pentateuch, the historical books, the poets, and then the prophets. Within the historical books, we've got Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, and then the books that we're looking at specifically here, 1st and 2nd Kings. There'll also be 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. The title of the book, the Hebrew title of the book, is Melech, or Melachim, which is just kings. And that reminds us that in the Hebrew Bible, 1st and 2nd Kings was considered a unified book. It was considered one book. Meanwhile, we have the Greek title. It means the same thing. Basileia is the Greek word for kingdoms. And in the Septuagint, that's the translation of the Hebrew Bible into Greek, we actually refer to Samuel and Kings as 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Kings, which can be a little confusing. I'm going to be using the titles for our English Bible. Now we have several books that deal with kings. We've got 1st and 2nd Samuel, where we see kings. For example, Saul was the first king of Israel in 1st Samuel. 2nd Samuel, it tells us about the reign of King David. 1st Kings begins with the reign of Solomon, and then you have the kingdom which is divided into both Israel in the north and Judah in the south. And then 2nd Kings tells the story of that divided kingdom. Since we're going to be focusing only on 1st and 2nd Kings, let's zoom in on that. And 1st Kings chapters 1 through 11, we're going to see the united kingdom under Solomon. And then in chapter 12, the kingdom is going to split into 2 parts. You'll have a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom, the northern kingdom of Israel, and it's just called Israel. I'm going to use the phrase the northern kingdom. And then Judah will be in the south. And that's going to continue until 2nd Kings chapter 17, when the northern kingdom is taken away into captivity. And now you'll only have the southern kingdom of Judah. So here's our outline of 1st and 2nd Kings. We begin with the United Kingdom of Solomon. He has both Israel and Judah, all 12 tribes under his domain. That's chapters 1 through 12. And then after that division, you're actually going to see Judah and Israel in conflict with one another, but also sometimes with other nations as well. That's chapters 13 through 16. And then in chapter 17 of 1st Kings, you have the ministry of Elijah. And Elijah comes on the scene, and it is great, and it is wonderful, and it's powerful. And it comes to a conclusion with the passing of the prophetic mantle from Elijah to his assistant Elisha. And so we go from Elijah to Elisha. That's the pivotal point in this entire section. That's 2nd Kings chapter 2. And then we have the ministry of Elisha, and everything is doubled. You know, if Elijah healed somebody, Elisha heals 2 people, and he receives a double portion of the Spirit. Next, we have more wars of Judah and Israel, especially culminating in chapter 17, when the northern kingdom of Israel is taken away into captivity. And now, after this, we're only going to have one kingdom left, and that will be the kingdom of Judah, and that's chapters 18 through 25. So that's a story of sort of an overlook of the entire books of 1st and 2nd Kings. The authorship of this book, first of all, the author is unknown. He's not named either by himself. There is a tradition that says that maybe it's Jeremiah. Others have wondered, gee, could it have been Ezra? And I'm just going to have to say we don't know. Whoever it is using some sources that he references, he, I guess, or she, to be fair. For example, in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 41, we have a reference to the books of the Acts of Solomon. Apparently there was something or some collection of writings already written, and now the author is citing and perhaps even quoting some of those sources. We also have a reference to the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel, and then parallel to that is the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah. Could either of these be what we think of as 1st and 2nd Chronicles? Maybe portions of that. I don't really know. I don't know if that had been written yet, or perhaps portions had been penned. We also note that 2nd Kings chapters 18 through 20 mirror Isaiah 36 through 38 in language which is almost exactly identical. And two authors do not independently express thought alike, and that means that someone was copying off of someone, and that was allowed back then. We didn't have the plagiarism rules that we have today. But that also might be a hint of who is writing. Could Isaiah have been involved, or maybe Isaiah is borrowing from somebody else who actually writes a portion of that. So again, we have to say we don't know. Still on that authorship question, 1 Kings chapter 9, verses 20 through 21. Let me read it to you. As for all the people who were left of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, who were not of the sons of Israel, their descendants who were left after them in the land, whom the sons of Israel were unable to destroy utterly, from them Solomon levied forced laborers. But notice the author adds, even to this day, that these were forced laborers, and they continued being forced laborers for a long time. Notice, the natural way of reading this would be to say, even to the time this was written. Now, that's going to be a little problematic because the southern kingdom of Judah is going to be taken away into captivity at the end of 2 Kings. So are these people really forced laborers even to that day? Well, you say, well, perhaps. But there's another passage that's even more striking. That other passage is the description of the Holy of Holies in Solomon's temple. And we read that the poles that carried the Ark of the Covenant, the poles were so long that the ends of the poles could be seen from the holy place before the inner sanctuary, but they could not be seen outside. And then notice again a similar phrase, they are there to this day. Now, by the time we get to the end of 2 Kings, not only won't the poles be there to that day, but the temple won't even be there. The temple will have been destroyed. The Ark of the Covenant either destroyed or hidden or lost, but it won't be there. And so they are there to this day is a bit anachronistic in that it looks back to something that was there in Solomon's day and quite a bit longer, but not all the way to the end of the writing of 1 and 2 Kings. So the authorship, of course, you can't write an entire book until after it is completed. And we had the United Kingdom, and then we noted that the story then follows the Northern Kingdom all the way until the Assyrian captivity. And at the same time, it's following the Southern Kingdom as it's taking place too. But that lasts a lot longer, all the way to the Babylonian captivity. So the book could not come into its present form, that is, its completed form, until the Babylonian captivity has at least begun. Now, at the end of 2 Kings, they have not returned from the Babylonian captivity, which perhaps suggests that it's in that interim, during that time of captivity, that this book is being written. Of course, that's not for sure. It could have been written later, and it's just not mentioned that they had returned. But you would expect to see a reference to that return if it had taken place. We also have, during this period, we have the ministries of Elijah and Elisha. We noted that. We're also going to have two revivals that take place, both of them after the Assyrian captivity of the Northern Kingdom. The first of those will be under Hezekiah, and the second of those will be under Josiah. So two periods of revival, and we could also look at Elijah and Elisha as something of a revival in the Northern Kingdom. Not sure how effective that is long term, but short term, yes, people turned away from Baal and back to God. Finally, I want to notice that there have been three eras of revelation that have been given, three eras where you see a great move of God and of the Lord bringing miracles. For example, you think of Moses and Joshua, and the Red Sea is being divided, and the 10 plagues and the 10 commandments, and God is leading them with a pillar of fire. And then in the ministry of Joshua, he stops the Jordan River, and they go through, and there are walls falling down, and the sun stands still, and the miracles are just enormous. And you get to the end of the story of Joshua, and it all stops. And it's not to say that God goes on vacation, but the miracles die way, way down until we get to the days of Elijah and Elisha. And again, there's fire being called down from heaven, and there's people that are rising from the dead, and Elijah calls for no rain, and it doesn't rain. And then Elisha comes on the scene, and it's miracles times two, floating axe heads, and again, people being raised from the dead, and angels coming, and all sorts of things that are taking place. And then after Elijah and Elisha, I'm not saying, again, that there's no miracles, but they will be much fewer and far between until we get to the point of the third era, and that's going to be Jesus and the apostles, where people will see the ministry of Jesus and say, well, gee, that sort of reminds me of Elijah. And John the Baptist is actually going to be asked, are you Elijah? And no, he's not. And then after the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, we have the apostles. And again, they are doing many of those miracles, at least early in the book of Acts. As we move later on the book of Acts, it seems to slow up just a bit. Now, each one of those eras was followed by a period of written revelation. For example, with Moses and Joshua, you have the giving of the law. And then that second era, we have Elijah and Elisha, and following their ministry, they don't write anything, but afterwards we're going to see the written prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah and Amos and Micah and Hosea and all the way down to Malachi. And then it's going to stop. Until we get to the third era, Jesus and the apostles. Jesus does not write anything, but the apostles do, and so we have the writing of the New Testament at that time. And so God has acted and he has spoken, but then he has responded by having that speech put into writing. And we have that in our scriptures.